In the turbulent year of 1256, a shadow stretched across Persia cast by the relentless advance of the Mongol war machine. This was not merely an invasion, it was a reckoning, aimed directly at the heart of an organization that had instilled fear and reshaped political landscapes for nearly 2 centuries, the Nizari Ismaili state, commonly known as the Order of Assassins. Their mountain fortresses, particularly the legendary Alamut, were considered impregnable, symbols of defiance against both Seljuk sultans and Abbasid caliphs. Yet, a single devastating Mongol tactic, patiently executed, would dismantle this myth and forever alter the course of medieval history. To understand the profound impact of this siege, one must first grasp the entity the Mongols sought to eradicate. The Nizari Ismailis were a branch of Shiite Islam, founded in the late 11th century by Hassan I Sabah, a charismatic and brilliant strategist. Disillusioned with the political and religious corruption of his era, Hassan seized the remote mountain fortress of Alamut in 1090 by cunning rather than force. From this eyrie, he established an independent state, not territorial in the conventional sense, but a network of self-sufficient castles and strongholds scattered across Persia and Syria. These communities were bound by an esoteric interpretation of Islam, absolute loyalty to their imam, and a chillingly effective method of political assassination, which earned them the moniker assassins, derived from the Arabic hashashin, a term often misinterpreted as drug users, but more likely referring to followers of Hassan. For generations, the Old Man of the Mountain, as their successive Grand Masters were known, exerted influence far beyond their numerical strength. Their targets were invariably powerful, often tyrannical figures, viziers, generals, even European crusader kings. The psychological impact of their precise, often public, killings was immense. Opponents lived in constant dread, knowing that no fortress, no retinue of guards could guarantee safety if they earned the ire of Alamut. This fear was a potent weapon, creating a climate of apprehension that made diplomacy, alliances, and even open warfare against them fraught with peril. Their decentralized power structure, secret communications, and highly trained fida'is, or self-sacrificing agents, made them incredibly difficult to suppress by conventional means. By the mid-13th century, however, a new force had emerged, one that operated on a scale and with a ruthlessness that dwarfed anything the assassins had previously encountered. The Mongol Empire, unified by Genghis Khan, was a juggernaut. After conquering vast swaths of Central Asia and Russia, their gaze turned westward. In 1253, Mongol Khan, the Great Khan, dispatched his younger brother, Hulagu, with an army estimated at 120,000 to 150,000 men, a staggering force for the era, specifically to crush the remaining independent Islamic states in Persia, including the Abbasid Caliphate and, crucially, the Nizari Ismailis. Hulagu's mandate was clear: destroy everything in his path that refused to submit. The Nizari Grand Master at this time was Rukn al-Din Kursha, a young and indecisive leader who had inherited a state already under immense pressure. Unlike his formidable predecessors, Kursha lacked the strategic genius and unwavering resolve necessary to confront an enemy of the Mongols' magnitude. He faced a critical choice: resist to the last or attempt negotiation. The Mongols, however, were not interested in protracted negotiations with a group they viewed as a source of instability and a potential threat to their trade routes. They had already endured subtle provocations from the assassins, including alleged plots against earlier Mongol commanders. Hulagu's campaign against the assassins began in earnest in 1256. His strategy was methodical, reflecting the Mongol genius for logistics and siege warfare. Rather than immediately launching a full assault on Alamut, he systematically targeted the outlying and less formidable Nizari fortresses. Towns like Tun, Sayaku, and others fell, often after intense sieges and massacres. This was a deliberate tactic: isolate the core, deplete resources, and erode morale. The Mongols were masters of psychological warfare. Their brutality served not just to conquer, but to terrify into submission. Kursha, trapped between the counsel of his more hawkish generals and the grim reality of Mongol power, attempted a series of delaying tactics and appeals. He sent envoys to Hulagu offering his submission, But these offers were always conditional, always with an implicit demand for some form of continued autonomy. The Mongols, however, demanded absolute unconditional surrender. Hulagu's response was always the same: dismantle your fortresses, come to my camp, and submit in person. It was during this period of feigned negotiations, from the late summer to the late autumn of 1256, that the Mongols employed the singular tactic that would prove decisive against Alamut. It wasn't a frontal assault, nor a surprise attack. It was a strategy of patient, relentless, and overwhelming encirclement and resource denial, combined with a sophisticated understanding of the Nizari's psychological vulnerabilities. Hulagu's forces approached Alamut, not as a single, overwhelming wave, but as a suffocating net. They established multiple siege camps around the fortress, effectively cutting off all supply lines and avenues for escape or reinforcement. This was crucial for a mountain stronghold like Alamut, which relied on stored provisions and access to external resources for its long-term viability. The Mongols didn't need to breach its walls immediately, they simply needed to wait. Accompanying the main Mongol army were specialized siege engineers. The Mongols understood that conventional siege engines often struggled against mountain fortifications. Their tactic was therefore two-pronged physical encirclement and mental attrition. They deployed a vast array of siege machinery, catapults, trebuchets, and stone throwers, not necessarily to destroy the walls immediately, but to constantly harass the defenders, inflict casualties, and chip away at the fortress's formidable defenses. Imagine the constant barrage day and night, the psychological toll of never-ending bombardment on a garrison trapped within. But the Mongols' single most devastating tactic was perhaps their most deceptively simple. They offered terms of surrender, not once, but repeatedly, to Damor. Allies the defenders and sow discord. Hulagu's envoys, often scholars and administrators from already conquered territories, would approach the fortress, promising clemency for those who surrendered immediately, contrasting it with the horrific fate of those who resisted. They targeted the leadership with promises of safe passage and even positions within the Mongol administration, knowing that the loyalty of a besieged garrison, no matter how fanatical, could eventually waver under ceaseless pressure and dwindling hope. More importantly, the Mongols orchestrated a continuous process of surrender from Kursha and his inner circle. Kursha, hoping to save his own life and consolidate his remaining power, continuously sent emissaries to Hulagu during the siege. Each time, he would attempt to negotiate delaying tactics, promising to dismantle a fortress today, another tomorrow, but always holding Alamut itself as a final bargaining chip. Hulagu, with chilling precision, exploited this indecisiveness. He demanded Kursha's personal surrender, knowing this would shatter the morale of the remaining garrisons. In November 1256, faced with a crushing siege by the Mongol vanguard under Kitbuka, and under immense pressure from elements within his own court, who saw the futility of resistance, Ruknal-din Kursha finally made his way down from the fortress of Maimundiz, one of the key Nizari strongholds near Alamut, and formally surrendered to Hulagu. This public act of submission, the Grand Master of the Assassins prostrating himself before the Mongol Khan, was a monumental blow to the Nizari cause. Even after Kursha's surrender, Alamut itself remained defiant for a brief period. Its governor, Qadi Nasir al-Din, and a small garrison initially resisted. But the loss of their imam, the symbol of their cosmic and earthly authority, was too great. The core of Nizari faith depended on absolute obedience to the imam. With their imam now a prisoner, the spiritual and moral foundation of their resistance crumbled. This was the singular, most effective Mongol tactic, not brute force alone, but the strategic isolation and psychological dismantling of leadership, followed by the systematic exploitation of that collapse. Hulagu ordered Kursha to instruct his remaining fortresses to surrender, while some, like Girdku, held out for decades due to their remote and defensible locations. Alamut, the spiritual and administrative heart, could not. On December 15, 1256, after approximately a month of relatively low-intensity siege following Kursha's surrender, the garrison of Alamut finally capitulated. It wasn't a bloody assault, it was an en masse surrender. The gates of the legendary fortress, which had never been taken by storm, slowly opened. The Mongols entered Alamut not just as conquerors, but as methodical destroyers. Their objective was not merely to occupy, but to annihilate the Nizari state and its ideology. They systematically gathered the priceless Library of Alamut, a repository of centuries of Nizari theological texts, scientific treatises, and historical records. While some accounts suggest portions were spared by Juvaini, Hulagu's Persian secretary and chronicler who recognized their historical value, the vast majority were burned. This act was more than just destruction. It was an attempt to erase the Nizari's intellectual and spiritual heritage, to deny their narrative. The physical destruction was equally comprehensive. The Mongols systematically dismantled Alamut, stone by stone. Its walls were torn down, its watchtowers toppled, its intricate irrigation systems, which had sustained the community for so long, were destroyed. The goal was to render the fortress uninhabitable, incapable of ever again becoming a center of resistance. Rukn-al-Din Kursha's fate served as a brutal lesson. Despite his initial hopes for clemency, Hulagu had no intention of allowing the Nizari imam to live. Kursha, having outlived his usefulness as a tool for securing other surrenders, was sent towards Möngke Khan. He was murdered en route, reportedly in the snows of Mongolia, his family and remaining entourage swiftly eliminated. The leadership of the Nizari state was extinguished. The fall of Alamut and other Nizari strongholds marked the end of the independent Nizari Ismaili state in Persia. While Nizari communities persisted, often going underground or migrating, their era as a geopolitical power with the ability to destabilize empires was over. The legend of the assassins, of their feared fidais and impenetrable fortresses, was shattered by the cold, calculating efficiency of the Mongol war machine. The impact of this Mongol tactic, the deliberate psychological attrition, the relentless pursuit of the leader's surrender to break the will of the entire network, rather than relying solely on direct military assault, was profound. It showcased the Mongols' adaptive strategic genius. They understood that even the most formidable physical defenses could be rendered useless if the will to defend them was broken. Their mastery of logistics allowed them to sustain long sieges, their reputation for brutality served as a potent psychological weapon, and their diplomatic stratagems were designed to exploit internal divisions and leadership weaknesses. This chapter in history stands as a testament not only to the might of the Mongol Empire, but also to the intricate interplay of military power, psychological warfare, and political maneuvering. The secret force of the Order of Assassins, for all its mystique and terror, ultimately succumbed not to a single glorious battle, but to a carefully orchestrated campaign of encirclement, demoralization, and the calculated destruction of its leadership. The mountains of Persia, once home to silent watchers and feared assassins, fell quiet beneath the shadow of the Mongol eagle, forever altering the medieval landscape. The year 1256 thus marked not only the demise of a unique religious and political entity, but also underscored the effectiveness of a Mongol strategy that prioritized systemic dismantling over mere conquest. The fall of Alamut remains a stark reminder that even the most formidable and feared organizations can be brought down when faced with an adversary capable of leveraging overwhelming force with strategic precision and psychological insight. It was a siege that defined an era, a conflict where a single, calculated tactic proved more devastating than any direct assault, dismantling a power that had terrified the medieval world for centuries. The story of Alamut's fall is less about the breaching of walls and more about the breaking of wills, a testament to the fact that even in an age of steel and stone, the human element remains the ultimate battlefield.